The scent of old paper and lemon-scented polish usually made the library a sanctuary, but today the air was charged with something else, something metallic and cold, like the taste of a storm about to break. It was the first day of the new semester at Northwood High, a school perched on the edge of a struggling town, a place where the factory closures had cast long shadows and the football team was the only remaining religion. And the new teacher, Miss Eva Valdez, standing quietly by the periodical section, was about to learn that the school's reputation for having a feral, unchecked senior class wasn't just an exaggeration whispered in teacher orientation. It was a living, breathing beast, and it was about to walk through the door. She adjusted her modest white blouse, a final, subconscious gesture of order before the chaos descended. And if you've ever felt like the world is divided into those who create fear and those who are forced to live in it, then you need to subscribe and join us, because what happened in that library didn't just change one school. It became a legend. It began not with a shout, but with a vibration. The heavy double doors of the library swung open with a force that made the windows rattle in their frames. The usual quiet hum of computers and turning pages ceased instantly, replaced by a terrified silence. He led the pack, Jake Larson, a mountain of a teenager swaddled in his blue and yellow varsity jacket, the wool arms straining over muscles built in the weight room and tested in back alley fights. The jacket was more than clothing. It was a suit of armor, a declaration of sovereignty. To his left was Leo, lean and wary, with eyes that darted around the room, cataloging weaknesses. To his right was Mark, built like a fridge, his expression one of perpetual, dull aggression. They moved with a swagger that was practiced, a performance of dominance for their audience of terrified freshmen and studious outcasts. Their target was a small group of freshmen huddled around a central wooden table, their textbooks open to a chapter on the Civil War, a history of conflict about to be eclipsed by a modern one. A girl named Sarah, with wide, earnest eyes and a binder covered in carefully drawn anime characters, was pointing to a passage. She was the one Jake focused on. I said, "Move." His voice was a low growl, devoid of any request, pure command. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. The threat was woven into the quiet gravel of his tone. Sarah flinched, her entire body recoiling as if struck. We were here first," she stammered, a tremor of defiance that was instantly snuffed out. Jake's hand slammed down on the open textbook, the sound of gunshot in the quiet. "And I'm here now. This is my table. This is my library. This is my school." He leaned in, his face inches from hers. "Now, get your crap and get out." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes, not of sadness, but of pure, humiliating fear. Her friends were statues, frozen in place, hoping that by becoming invisible, they would be spared. This was the ecosystem of Northwood High. This was the natural order. That's when a new voice entered the fray. It was calm, a steady river cutting through the toxic tension. "Is there a problem here?" Ms. Valdez had moved from the periodicals to stand a few feet from the table. Her posture was relaxed, her hands clasped loosely in front of her. She looked, for all the world, like just another young teacher, naive to the way things worked. Jake turned slowly, a predator amused by a new, curious creature in its territory. He looked her up and down, a slow, disrespectful appraisal that lingered on her simple skirt and blouse, seeing not a professional, but a target. "No problem," he said, a smirk twisting his lips. "Just establishing the pecking order. You must be the new sub. Heard we were getting one. I'm Ms. Valdez. And in this library, the only order is quiet and respect." Her tone was even, pedagogical, but her eyes, a deep, warm brown, held a glint of something unyielding, a core of steel that his bluster couldn't scratch. Jake laughed, a harsh, barking sound that echoed in the cavernous room. A few students hidden among the stacks flinched. "Respect is earned, miss. And around here, you earn it by knowing your place." He took a step closer, invading her personal space, using his height and bulk as a weapon. The other students watched, a captive audience to a play they'd seen before, always with the same ending: the teacher would back down, mutter something about the principal's office, and retreat, their authority permanently diminished. "My place is as an educator. Your place is as a student. Now, I think you should leave the library." Her hands, resting at her sides, were curled into loose fists, the only hint of the tension coiling within her. She didn't step back. She held her ground, an island in the advancing tide. Jake's smirk vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine, unadulterated anger. Being dismissed, and by a woman, in front of this audience, was an unforgivable sin in his code. It was a direct challenge to the kingdom he'd built on fear. "You don't tell me what to do." The words were quiet, venomous. He moved with a shocking, practiced speed, shoving her back against the solid edge of the wooden table. The air left her lungs in a soft, involuntary gasp. The impact was jarring, painful. Before she could even register the pain, before she could push back, Leo and Mark moved in. They were strong, fueled by teenage bravado and the pack mentality of hyenas. They seized her arms from behind, their grips like vices, and forced her down. Her back was pressed hard against the table's surface, the worn, cool wood a stark contrast to the heat of their hands. They pinned her, their weight immense, their confidence absolute. She was trapped. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of primal fear. This was beyond bullying. This was assault. The humiliation was a live wire, sizzling through her veins. The other students looked away, ashamed and terrified, their heads bowed as if in prayer for it to be over. Jake leaned over her, his face inches from hers, his victory complete. His breath smelled of mint and menace. "See, this is how we welcome new teachers. We show them the rules." He reached out and patted her cheek, a condescending, mocking gesture that was far more violating than the shove. It was the gesture of an owner to a pet, a master to a slave. For a long, terrifying second, Ms. Valdez felt the cold, gut-wrenching grip of pure panic. Her vision tunneled. The sounds of the library, the frantic whisper of a page turning, the hum of the lights, faded into a dull roar. She was a 28-year-old woman being physically dominated by teenage boys. The injustice, the sheer audacity of it, was a fire in her chest. But then, something inside her shifted. It wasn't a switch being flipped, but a deep, ancient well of training and trauma being tapped. The fear didn't vanish, but it was joined by something else, a cold, calculated, and terrifying clarity. She stopped struggling against their grip. Her body went slack for a moment, a deliberate surrender. The bullies, feeling her go limp, smirked at each other. Leo even chuckled, a low, ugly sound. They thought they had broken her. They thought the game was over. They were so wrong. Her voice, when she spoke, was low, a whisper that was somehow sharper and clearer than any shout. It cut through the room's thick atmosphere and lodged itself into the brain of every person present. It was no longer the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a verdict. "You shouldn't have touched me." Jakey laughed again, but it was weaker this time, a nervous reaction. The steadiness in her eyes was unnerving him. "Or what? You'll send me to the principal. Write me a detention slip." He gestured around the room with his chin. "Nobody's going to say a word. They know what happens to snitches." "No," she said, her eyes locking with his. They seemed darker now, bottomless, like pools of oil. In them, he didn't see his own reflection. He saw a void. "I'm going to give you a lesson you should have learned a long time ago. About consequences. About the fact that there is always someone stronger." With a sudden, explosive movement that defied physics in their hold, she twisted her right arm. It wasn't a struggle, it was a technique, a precise, fluid motion born of thousands of hours of repetition. Her wrist turned and folded in a way that slipped it from Mark's grasp, as if his hand were greased. Before his brain could even register the loss of contact, her hand, stiff as a blade, chopped inward in a short, devastating arc, connecting with the nerve cluster on the inside of his elbow. A bolt of white-hot agony shot up his arm. It went numb, useless, fingers springing open involuntarily. A grunt of shock and pain escaped his lips. She didn't stop to watch him stumble back. Pivoting on her hip, using the table for leverage, she drove her left elbow back into Leo's solar plexus. It was a perfectly placed blow, not with wild rage, but with surgical precision. The air left him in a pained, choked whoosh, his grip loosening instantly as his body folded, his mind consumed by the primal need for a breath that wouldn't come. It took less than 2 seconds. The two boys, who moments before had been her captors, were now broken accessories to the scene, one clutching his deadened arm, his face a mask of stunned pain, the other on his knees, doubled over and gasping like a fish on dry land. The entire library was frozen, a tableau of absolute mind-bending shock. Jake stared, his brain trying and failing to catch up with what his eyes had just witnessed. The woman he had pinned was now standing, her posture completely transformed. She wasn't just standing, she was rooted. a force of nature that had decided to take form in a modest blue skirt and white blouse. The calm on her face was gone, replaced by a fierce, terrifying determination that seemed to radiate heat. "What the?" he started, but the words died in his throat. Ms. Valdez moved toward him. It wasn't a rush, it was a deliberate, unstoppable advance, the walk of a predator who knows the hunt is over. He threw a wild, panicked punch, the kind that had intimidated 100 other kids in hallways and parking lots. It was all force, no technique. She didn't block it. She flowed inside it, her body moving like water, deflecting the force of his arm with her forearm, her body now impossibly close to his. His momentum was his own undoing. Her free hand shot up, not to his face but to the lapel of his precious varsity jacket. She gripped the thick, embroidered material, her knuckles white with strain. "This jacket," she said, her voice still that low, carrying thunder that vibrated in his bones, "doesn't make you a leader. It makes you a mascot. You use your strength to terrorize those who are weaker. That doesn't make you strong. It makes you a coward. The weakest kind of person there is." Then, she executed a perfect ogoshi, a major hip throw. She dropped her weight, pivoted, and used his own charging momentum and weight against him. It was so fast, so brutally efficient it looked like a magic trick. One moment he was standing, a hulking figure of menace. The next he was airborne, a flailing mass of shock and panic, before he landed flat on his back on the hard, unyielding linoleum floor. The impact was a sickening, resonant thud that seemed to shake the very foundations of the room. He lay there, the wind utterly knocked out of him, staring up at the buzzing fluorescent lights. His world not just upended but shattered. Every axiom of his life, that he was the strongest, the most feared, the top of the food chain, had been proven false in under 5 seconds. She stood over him, not with triumph, but with a cold, righteous anger that was far more frightening. "You think this is power?" She gestured to the watching students, whose faces were now transformed, alight with a mixture of awe, vindication, and a dawning, fierce hope. "True power is control. It's knowing how to defend yourself and choosing when to use it. It's having the discipline you so clearly lack. It's protecting people, not preying on them." She then knelt down, close to his ear, her voice dropping to a whisper that was for him alone, a secret that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "I spent 6 years in the Marines, military police, 2 tours in some of the worst places you could ever imagine. I have disarmed men with knives, taken down suspects twice your size, and looked into the eyes of real monsters, boy. You are just a child playing a very, very dangerous game in a library that smells like lemon polish. If I ever see you, or your friends, so much as look at another student with disrespect again, if I hear a whisper of you pushing someone around, I won't be this gentle. This school, these students, are under my protection now. Do you understand me?" The word, Marinans, hit Jake with more force than the throw. It wasn't just a word, it was an explanation, a key that unlocked the terrifying mystery of her. It explained the impossible speed, the effortless skill, the unshakable authority in her eyes that had seen things he could only see in video games. He wasn't just beaten, he was dismantled. His entire identity, carefully constructed over years of intimidation, shattered into a million pieces at the feet of this unassuming woman. The varsity jacket felt like a costume now, a ridiculous, childish outfit. He could only manage a weak, terrified nod, a tear of shame and frustration leaking from the corner of his eye. Miss Valdez stood up, her gaze sweeping over Leo and Mark, who shrank back against the bookshelves as if trying to merge with the encyclopedias. She then looked at the other students, meeting their eyes one by one. The fear was gone, replaced by something profound. She walked over to Sarah, who was still trembling, but now with the aftershocks of adrenaline and relief. Ms. Valdez placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft again, the storm having receded, leaving behind a profound, unshakable calm. Sarah nodded, the tears now flowing freely. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying the weight of every bullied kid who had ever wished for a protector. The aftermath was a quiet earthquake that reshaped the very landscape of Northwood High. The bullies slunk out of the library, not with their usual swagger, but with the hunched shoulders of the defeated. The story spread through the school like wildfire, morphing into legend with each retelling. By lunchtime, she was the Valdez, a mythic figure who had handedly taken down the untouchable Jake Larson and his crew without breaking a sweat or ruffling her blouse. The principal, upon hearing the full story from a dozen terrified but thrilled eyewitnesses, had a long, closed-door meeting with Ms. Valdez. He expected anger, demands for expulsion. Instead, she was calm, resolute. She presented it not as a disciplinary issue but a teaching moment. The boys were given a choice: severe disciplinary action that would end their athletic careers and likely their chances at college, or they could voluntarily enroll in the new, mandatory conflict resolution and peer mentorship program she would be starting. They chose the latter. Their own shame and fear did more to correct their behavior than any suspension ever could. They became quiet, almost polite, a constant, walking reminder of the day the balance of power permanently shifted. Ms. Valdez didn't become a harsh disciplinarian. In fact, she became the school's most beloved and trusted adult. She started an after-school self-defense club that was always packed, not just with girls, but with boys who had also known the sting of Jake's reign. She taught literature with the same passion and intensity she'd shown in that library, her classroom a safe haven for the quiet, the bullied, the artistic, the different. She had looked into the heart of the darkness that had festered at Northwood High and, with a few precise, uncompromising movements, had carved it out. The library returned to its quiet, peaceful state, the scent of old books and polish once again a comfort. But if you looked closely at the central wooden table, you might see a small, almost imperceptible scuff mark on the floor nearby. The custodians couldn't quite buff it out. It remained, a permanent scar, a sacred relic from the day a new teacher arrived, and instead of being broken by the bullies who pinned her, she made them regret ever touching her. She taught them the cost of cruelty, and in doing so, taught an entire school what true strength really looks like. It's a story that never gets old, a reminder that heroes often don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear a simple white blouse and carry a lesson plan, and they possess a quiet, unyielding power that can change the world, one broken bully at a time. It makes me wonder, where are you watching this from today? From which part of the country are you joining this channel and witnessing this moment of empowerment? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one,